I grew up poor. Growing up, white trash and trailer trash are what people thought when they met me. Fortunately for me, the no count, I had the privilege of growing up in the early 2000s. I say this is a privilege for a few reasons. One, the internet was still in a Wild West era and internet access was limited. Two, social media didn't exist. And three, the PS2 was in its heyday. The first 2 points are not something I'm going to dive deep into today, but the third is. The PS2 was the most affordable gaming console of all time, being that it functioned as a multimedia machine at an affordable price point. Because it could play DVDs, my parents were willing to save to get one, and that opened the door for me to have the best thing a child in my type of situation could possibly have: affordable games. This was definitely worth going without food for a couple extra days. For those of you who don't know, PS2 games were cheap and consistently became $20 or less within a few months of release. Sometimes there would be a $5 bin at Walmart full of PS2 games, and they weren't necessarily bad games all the time either. Needless to say, that era of gaming was the best to grow up poor in, since they were so affordable. I remember saving pennies, quarters, to maybe buy a $5 game from time to time. Now within my childhood, I only ever bought like one from that bin, but that affordable nature really can't be understated. Gaming is a great hobby for people of all ages. Interactive media such as games are great for the growing child's mind, and video games provided me an outlet for all of my frustrations growing up and a coping mechanism for my various depressive periods. Foremost among the 6th generation catalog that provided me with a virtual world to grow up in was Mortal Kombat Deception. Released in 2004, MKD was my introduction to the Mortal Kombat franchise alongside the 1995 movie.
Those were $500 sunglasses, asshole.
I was in 3rd grade at the time, and the only reason I got to play the game was because my stepbrother, who lived primarily with his grandparents, was super spoiled. They got him anything he wanted, and boy, he acted like a kid that got everything he wanted, I'll tell you what. I'm a pretty easy person to get along with, and I always have been. So he and I did get along, and as a result, I got access to many games my older siblings didn't. The age I was at when MKD entered my life is significant. I was 8 or 9 at the time, still in my formative years. Obviously, as a child that young, I was instantly attracted to the blood, the gore, and the iconic fatalities mechanic.
May wins. Fatality.
Mortal Kombat was a fresh new world for me to explore with massive amounts of lore, and through the Conquest mode, the first fighting game story mode to my knowledge, unless you count the Conquest mode of Deadly Alliance, I was able to live in the MK world and experience it through Shujinko's eyes, with the shadow of Onaga, the Dragon King, always looming overhead. The MKD Conquest mode was properly epic, and it quickly became my favorite game. Beyond the Conquest mode, MKD came with puzzle combat and chess combat, which were perfect distractions to have when the fighting gameplay wasn't something I wanted to engage with in a vacuum. All of this matters for a few reasons. Firstly, MKD was a lot of game, and I will always have the stance that fighting games are perfect for people who don't have a lot of money. Fighting games have infinite replayability since there's always better combos to discover and more characters to get good with. That's how it worked for me. Whenever I started getting bored, I just played a new character, and the characters of Mortal Kombat are where the impact in my life lies. Shujinko is a great character, which might be an unpopular opinion given the way Boone never gives him the light of day, and I personally identified with him from a very early age. Shujinko comes from a small village and has always given off poor vibes to me. His possible poorness didn't hold him back from being able to learn the combat styles of all the major players in the Mortal Kombat universe, and to play a major part in my favorite section of the Timeline 1.0 Mortal Kombat story, however. Stories where an underdog rise up by the value of their own hard work are the exact type of stories I will always get behind, because every success I've had in life has come from severe hard work and sometimes personal suffering. I had a counselor when I was younger, and one of my foundational Mortal Kombat Deception memories is at the very end of the game where you have to fight Scorpion as the final boss of the campaign of the Conquest mode. I remember as a child, I raged so hard that I had like this board game RTS thing that I was working on in a notebook. It had different races and a map and all kinds of stuff, and I remember I raged so hard in front of my counselor that I ripped this thing up that I had worked on for hours and hours and hours as like a therapeutic thing. But I will tell you, like, it made me rage and I quit the game for a little while, but that memory made me want to go back, and as I got older in high school and middle school, I kept coming back to Mortal Kombat Deception, and when I was able to beat him easily, when I was able to beat Onaga on max difficulty with every single character with ease, it was this sense of accomplishment that really I hadn't felt at any point in my life up until then. But I didn't stop with Mortal Kombat Deception, obviously. This is where Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks enters the story. A 3D beat-em-up spin-off. This game is perfect, and it allowed me to learn some basic interpersonal skills. This matters because I'm someone with Asperger's, a condition that, since the time I was diagnosed, has been considered a part of the autism spectrum. Part of that is that connecting to other people has always been difficult for me. Comprehending facial expressions and engaging in conversations were borderline impossible for me at this time in my life, although I was past my nonverbal era. Making friends is a challenge, and finding others that are as passionate about my hyperfixations that I am is also hard. All of these things are true to this very day, but over time I've developed some coping strategies to help me out, and I use the positive aspects of autism, the hyperfixations, the focus, the high ability to learn, to make my life better. Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks is one of the games where I started to learn how to connect to others. My cousin Michael and I would play this game religiously, alongside games like Godzilla Save the Earth, WWE SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. And Unreal Tournament. Oh, I can't forget Unreal Tournament. Through it, I learned how to weaponize gaming as a way of connecting to others, something that I would use constantly throughout my life, including how I made this YouTube channel for the sole reason of finding people to talk about gaming with. For someone like me, anything that teaches interpersonal connections is something of paramount importance. Gaming is what that is for me, and Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks is a part of my history in regards to that. Beyond learning how to make these connections, Shaolin Monks is one of the pieces of media that taught me that I like to write. I like to create stories. It's something that I would later develop further by playing Age of Empires 2, but that is a separate story for a later video. After playing Shaolin Monks, I created a self-insert Mortal Kombat character in my mind, and when I would play outside, I put that character in the stories of Deception and Shaolin Monks and later Armageddon. This type of imaginative play is something many future writers go through, and the popularity of Wattpad is a huge piece of evidence proving me in the right. I love writing, and part of the reason that is because of my time with Shaolin Monks. I really hope it gets a remaster at some point because I have been wanting to replay and plat this game for years. Quickly and crucially, Mortal Kombat became one of my favorite franchises, right behind Final Fantasy, and a major hyperfixation. It provided me with a safe space in an unsafe world, so when my father got me a copy of Mortal Kombat Armageddon, I devoured the game quickly, including the plethora of lore that it added to the franchise. By the time I got to it, I had a system when it came to Mortal Kombat games. On a piece of paper, I would create a list of all the characters in the game, and I would only check them off if I were able to beat the arcade tower on max difficulty with that character. My life was hard growing up, and as a result, I loved the sense of accomplishment I would get from achieving those victories in the tower. I got Armageddon at a great time in my life too. I got it around 2007, just in time for my mother to marry my second stepfather. He was a real piece of work, just like the first, and at 11 to 12 years old, I spent more time gaming than suffering in the real world. Gaming kept me away from drug users who would like nothing more than to lure me into their economic ecosystem. And gaming kept me away from my family, which for me was healthy. The Armageddon era of my life was hard, and there were several times where I nearly committed suicide by overdosing on my prescribed autism and depression medication. Luckily, I didn't do that, and a few years later, when I thought and heard the franchise wasn't going to move past Armageddon, Mortal Kombat 2011 would come out, and with it, I would jump into the 7th generation. MK9 is my favorite game in the franchise. By the time I played it, I was in high school, I finally had friends, and I was moving towards being happier. Through MK9, I overcame my first hard boss, Shao Kahn, on max difficulty, and the story was stronger than it had ever been in its presentation. MK9 came with immense replayability, better fatalities, and as such, more game for me to sink my teeth into. It is also the last major game I need to talk about for this video. MK9 is where I learned the importance of characterization and writing. The characters in MK9 are flawed, and those flaws cause issues amongst themselves and their fellow man. Whenever I make a character now, I always ask myself if they are going to stand out in my readers' minds as much as the individual characters stand out in MK9. Even the palette-swapped ninjas all have personality and individual characteristics, making them stand out despite being initially just a paint job on a reused character model. It's a lesson that many burgeoning writers always fail to make, and I hope whenever I put out my debut novel, my characters are all seen as unique and interesting as these MK characters are. MK9 put together everything I loved about the franchise. A great story, the ability to play with friends through the tag team mode, and the revitalization of one of my favorite franchises. Mortal Kombat has been there through all of my formative years, and I always get something out of them. MK9 was the last one that had a major impact on my personal life in this way, since Mortal Kombat X would come out when I was in college, and no one I knew at the time played it, and I also didn't need anything from the franchise anymore on a personal level. And Mortal Kombat 11 came out when I was already teaching, and once again, no one I knew played it, and it didn't have a major impact. Now, Mortal Kombat 1 is out. I'm making videos, but that's more or less where the impact ends. Sometimes I miss the days when Mortal Kombat impacted my life in a more personal way, but I'll always be thankful for the ones that did come out at just the right time to fundamentally change the course of my life. Times change, and I'll never have the time to really dedicate to an MK game again, and that's alright. At some point, acceptance is important, and I'm happy that Mortal Kombat has taught me that lesson as well over the last few years. I love Mortal Kombat, and I think I always will. In the same way I love seeing an old friend and get so happy when they come around after a long hiatus. And isn't that what really matters? Now, if you've been subbed to the channel for a little bit of time, you'll know that I love all kinds of genres and games. I play anything I have a passing interest in, and I like to just know things about gaming in general. Mortal Kombat wasn't the only thing I played during my life, and if you'd like to hear more about other games that changed my life, I would love to make videos about them. Mortal Kombat 1, 2 is out now, and I really do hope that I'm able to dive a little bit deeper in it, and if it does have an impact on my life, it's going to show up through the YouTube and the way that I make videos through it. I've been streaming Mortal Kombat about once a week the last 2 weeks, and I think I'm going to keep that cadence up at least until Spider-Man 2 comes out, so please jump in some time and chat with me about Mortal Kombat. You can also check out my top 10s and more thought pieces like this over the course of the next few weeks as I continue to work towards the Mortal Kombat 1 Platinum Trophy. Is there a game that changed your life? Let me know in the comments below. If you like what you saw, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ding that bell for more really good gaming content. And more important than anything I've said in this video, my guys, make sure you have a great day, gamers.